Hi class, welcome to our chapter on energy balance. This is a very interesting chapter that I think is applicable to each and every one of us, so I hope you like it. So first I have some trivia questions. So what is the estimated prevalence of overweight and obesity in the US? And the answer is a very scary 70%. So that is just incredible. Incredibly scary, incredibly unhealthy, incredibly dangerous. Next, I have this CDC video that I want us to watch. So I'm just going to bring up the video right now. All right, so this is the video. I have to have it small at first for it to record, but these are obesity trends over time, and the percentage of obese are indicated by color. So over time, you can see the years at the top, you can watch the percentage of US adults increase in obesity rates. And this comes from the CDC. So you see a lot of dark blue there. You can also notice some trends in which region this is happening in. Now we have yellow added, orange added, 25 to 29% obese. Remember that obesity is a BMI greater than 30. Now we have red added, over 30% obese. More and more states being populated by red. Notice it is kind of in the south. And then these are some summary slides. I believe, is there one more? I think that that's it. Okay. So, all right, so that video was pretty scary. Obesity is definitely a real problem, and it's a problem we need to do something about. This is another chart just showing kind of a different perspective on obesity rates. So again, this is BMI over 30, and this starts very early in the 1960s and then goes all the way till 2014. And this has different age groups sorted into categories. So you have 2 to 5-year-olds, 6 to 11-year-olds, 12 to 19-year-olds, and then everybody. So this is, young children and adolescents. And you can see in general, pretty much the rates have risen over time. However, you do see a little bit of stabilization here, and for the 2 to 5-year-olds, even kind of a downward trend. So that part is positive. This is just another chart showing obesity trends in the US, and in blue you have adults and in red you have children. This is really scary because childhood obesity is a huge risk factor for adult obesity. And adult obesity has many health consequences, some that are listed here. And this is not all inclusive. This is just some of them, but we will talk about these more coming up. Obesity can definitely contribute to low quality of life. It can contribute to disability, mobility limitations, increased hospitalizations, increased cost of medications, social stigma, the list goes on. So how do we classify body weight? We actually use something called BMI to classify body weight, which I know you have heard me talk about already. And we're going to see some BMI tables coming up. But we could classify somebody as underweight, and this person would have a BMI that would be less than 18.5. We could classify someone as normal weight, which you don't actually see included on my slide here. So normal weight, wow, that's a nice L. And normal weight would be between a BMI of 18.5 to 24.9. We could classify somebody as overweight. Overweight would be a BMI between 25 to 29.9. We could classify as somebody as being obese. Remember, we said over 30. And then morbidly obese, there's a couple different categories of this, and it can depend on other diseases that the person has, but generally speaking, somebody who is morbidly obese has a BMI greater than 40. So that is somebody with a very significant percent of body fat. How many people are in these categories? Overweight, we said close to 70%, obesity about 30%, and morbid obesity about 5% of the population, with numbers continuing to increase. What is a healthy body weight? So there are a lot of things that can determine whether somebody's body weight is healthy or not. And these factors are factors beyond just what the scale says. So, talking about body shape, is somebody petite and they've always been petite, so they're going to be smaller? Is somebody big boned and they come from a family of people who have larger frames? That person is going to be bigger. Can somebody maintain their body weight without having to diet? Does somebody have good eating habits, or do they have poor eating habits? And is somebody happy with their body weight? That's a big component as well. So a healthy body weight depends on lots of things. I said it is beyond just the scale. It can also include body mass index, BMI, which we just talked about, body composition, which has to do with what's actually in your body. For example, what percent is fat, what percent is muscle. Pattern of fat distribution. So this is where the fat actually is. Is the fat around your hips and your thighs, or is the fat centrally located around some of your internal organs? This actually makes a very significant difference as far as health outcomes. So this is a review question. Which of the following would be considered a healthy BMI? And you should be able to determine which BMI falls into each category. So these would be, potential questions you could be asked on a test. This is a BMI chart. And so if you wanted to just estimate your BMI, you could, estimate your weight and then, or know what your weight is, and then go to your height. And so, for example, I weigh just over 130 pounds. So I'm going to draw a line up, and I know my line is not perfect, but I'm about 5'6", so my BMI is right around here. And this is how you would do this. You would then draw this line up here, and it looks like my BMI is somewhere between 18.5 and 25, so I'm considered to be in a healthy range. Calculating your BMI. So there are two different methods you can use to calculate your BMI. I have discussed a few of these before, but here they are listed for you. The first one is using pounds and inches, and this is kind of what we do in the United States. We do use pounds and inches. The rest of the world uses the metric system, however. And so the second way to calculate your BMI is using kilograms and height in meters squared. So here I have these examples done for you. If you use kilograms and meters squared, you have to convert your body weight in pounds to kilograms. And to do that, you divide your weight in pounds. This is pounds. That should be an L, pounds, by 2.2 kilograms in each pound. You also would take your height in inches. So for example, this person is 71 inches tall, which is the equivalent of 5'11", and you multiply that height in inches times 2.54, because there are 2.54 centimeters to an inch. Then you would find out how many centimeters you are tall, and you would divide this by 100 to convert to meters. And then you have to square the whole thing. So you can see for these two different ways to calculate it, I get pretty similar numbers. I think that kilograms and meters is a little bit more accurate, but either one would be acceptable. This is an example that you can do on your own, and I do encourage you to do this on your own so that you can confirm that you actually do know how to calculate it. I'm going to tell you the answer that I got so that you can double check your work at home. So the answer that I got is 26.46. And it's okay if you get 26.5 or 26.42, just something very, very close to this. So check that you can do this. And if you're having any trouble calculating BMI, please email me and I can try to help you. So true or false, BMI is a good assessment tool for a competitive bodybuilder. The answer to this is false, because BMI only takes into account total weight over height. And we know that people are composed differently. For example, somebody might have more muscle versus more fat. And a person might actually weigh a lot if they have a lot of muscle, because muscle is very dense. And so if they have a lot of muscle, but they're not very tall, it's going to make it look like they have an overweight or even an obese BMI. So that being said, it is not accurate for bodybuilders. BMI is not perfect. It is a good estimate, and it is directly associated with mortality and some chronic diseases. However, it does not apply to everyone. It would not apply to pregnant women, obviously. It does not apply to children under 2 years old. And for the elderly, there are some changes in body composition. And so for the elderly, actually a higher BMI is considered better, usually in the range of 24 to 27. So BMI is good, but it's not perfect. Body composition. Body composition will tell us a lot more than BMI. So body composition will tell us what is muscle, what is fat, what is bone, etc. And this can tell us more about the actual health of a person than BMI can. And there are many different ways to measure body composition, and they all kind of have positives and negatives, pros and cons. So we're going to explore some of those methods. Okay, so this picture shows some of the methods, and then we have an additional picture coming up. The first one is underwater weighing, and underwater weighing is kind of like what it sounds. A person actually submerges themselves underwater here. They're dressed in a swimsuit, and then a skilled technologist does some measurements, and this can estimate body fat within 2 to 3%. Because the difference between the actual weight and the submerged weight provides a measure of body volume, and from that, they can determine body fat percent. This is very accurate, but the technologist does need special training to perform this. Skin folds thickness. So this involves using a device called a caliper, and you're pinching different areas of skin on the body. And you can plug in the measurements you get for this skin folds thickness into different equations that can help you estimate what percent is fat and what percent is muscle. This technique is nice because it's very inexpensive. It's very portable. You can do it mostly dressed. Anybody can do it. However, the more skill a measure has, the more accurate the results will be. And if you have different measures, they're very likely to get different results. Also, hydration status can kind of change the accuracy of this. On the bottom here, you see bioelectrical impedance analysis, and this particular woman is using a handheld device, but there are also ones that you can stand on. And what happens in bioelectrical impedance is it's able to measure body fat using a very, very low electrical current, a low intensity electrical current. And it actually sends this electrical current through the body. And the body tissues conduct electricity differently. For example, fluid, lean tissue like muscle and fat conduct electricity differently. And so the leaner the person, the less resistance to the current. And so then this machine will give you an estimate of body fat. DEXA, or dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. Right here it says DXA. I actually usually see this as DEXA. And this machine actually takes an image of your entire body and can differentiate muscle from fat. And it is pretty accurate, but it is very expensive. It takes about 20 minutes and, again, requires a skilled technician. This on the bottom is what's called a bod pod. And this uses air displacement to measure how much air is displaced by the body. And then that can be plugged into an equation to anticipate body composition as well. So body mass variations. These two people do weigh a different amount. One weighs 250, one weighs 150. So this person on the left is 100 pounds heavier than the person on the right. But both of the people actually have a very similar amount of lean body mass. And remember that lean body mass is muscle. So it's very interesting that the smaller person can have just as much muscle as the bigger person. You notice that the smaller person has way less body fat while the bigger person has much more body fat. This is another look at people. However, these people weigh the same amount. So people who are different sizes can weigh the same amount. And it can be due to differences in body composition. Muscle, right here, is more compact. So 1 pound of muscle is physically smaller than 1 pound of fat. So somebody who has more fat versus somebody who has less fat will be physically bigger, even if they weigh the same amount as the other person. And this is a great example of why BMI isn't perfect. These people are the same height and they are the same weight. So these two individuals would have the same BMI. But you can look at them and know that they are different. Okay, so this picture is looking at distribution of fat. Again, these two people, we don't have weights on them, but I'm friends with this girl, and so I can tell you that she weighs the same as this other girl. So A girl weighs the same as B girl, so same weight. But there is something different about them, and it has to do with the location of their body fat. In A girl, let's just call her Anna. Anna has a lot of abdominal body fat. And abdominal body fat is sometimes called apple-shaped body composition. It is also sometimes called android body composition. And abdominal body fat centered in the middle, is actually very dangerous, which we're going to see on the slide coming up. B, what's B's name going to be? Let's call B Brenda. And Brenda, unlike Anna, has her fat, you guys are going to love this, on her butt. Haha. She also has some fat on her thighs. So Brenda's got this nice big butt, and the fat that's actually surrounding the waist, the hips, the buttocks, and the thighs is actually a healthier type of fat than the fat surrounding the middle region. They call Brenda a pear shape because she looks kind of more like this, more like a pear. And the other name for a pear shape is gynoid shape. Okay, so we're going to see this coming up. Okay, so here we've got a man and a woman. And we have a man and a woman because there are actually gender differences or gender commonalities between these different shapes. So pear shape, generally speaking, are women. Apple shape, generally speaking, are men. However, that doesn't mean that men can't be pear-shaped or women can't be apple-shaped. But the hormones estrogen and progesterone that are higher in females actually contribute to the pear shape versus the apple shape. The apple shape, the android shape that you see here in this man, this is associated with higher risks of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, etc. And the cells that are the fat cells, the adipose cells surrounding these internal organs actually release hormones that can negatively affect those organs. You can tell if somebody is apple versus pear-shaped by measuring their waist circumference. And you guys are actually going to be doing that, or perhaps you already have done it on your diet analysis part 2. So what influences our body weight? So many things. One of them has to do with energy balance. Here you see energy balance, positive energy balance, and negative energy balance. And energy balance has to do with when the calories you put in your body equal the calories that you put out of your body. When somebody is in energy balance, they will not have any weight changes. In positive energy balance, the calories that you put in are way more than the calories you put out. And because of that, your body size increases. In negative energy balance, the calories you put in are less than the calories you put out. And this can lead to weight reduction. Energy expenditure. So how do we burn the calories that we put in? There are many factors, just like everything in this course. Many things contribute to it. So we're going to discuss those. Okay, so estimating energy expenditure. This is, excuse me, this is a pie chart that can show you what percentage of energy expenditure is responsible for what. So here you have something called basal metabolic rate, and you can see that this is responsible for the largest portion of energy expenditure. Here you have physical activity, and this is responsible for a pretty big chunk. However, there's a lot of variation. It can be 25 to 40%. Here you have thermic effect of food, 5 to 10%. And I would add that you actually have one other tiny little sliver of this pie. And so we're going to call this the red sliver. And it's very tiny, like you can't even see it, just pretend. And we're going to talk about what that is coming up. So there are actually 4 factors, but the 4th factor barely contributes. So it's often not mentioned. Okay, so balancing our energy. So on the left of this scale, we have foods that we might be eating, and on the right of this scale, we have ways that we will be burning our energy. So we saw basal metabolism, we saw thermic effect of food, we saw physical activity, and thermogenesis is this 4th component that was not shown on that pie graph. Basal metabolism. So basal metabolism is the largest contributor to energy expenditure, and this is energy expended in a fasting state, which means a 12-hour fast, to keep a resting, awake body alive in a warm, quiet environment. And so this includes the energy that our bodies spend on making new cells, making new bone marrow, our heart beating, our kidneys filtering, breathing, etc. If a person has not fasted or rested, then we use something that's a little bit less strict, and this is called the resting metabolic rate, or the RMR. So basal indicates fasting, and resting indicates that the person has not fasted. Basal metabolism and resting metabolism. So this is expressed as calories burned per unit time. And this is a very average amount, and there are things that can affect your basal metabolism, which we'll see coming up. But on average, women might burn 0.9 calories per kilo an hour. Men might burn 0.1 calories per kilo per hour. I said those were averages, and they are averages because they do not apply to everyone. There are factors that can increase or decrease BMR. So the factors that can increase BMR are those shown in black. So black is increase. The factors that can decrease BMR are shown in red. And we're going to talk about these coming up. Thermic effect of food. So remember what percent of metabolism this is. Hopefully you said 5 to 10%. This is a relatively small amount. This is the energy used for digestion, absorption, transport, storage, and metabolism. So remember that in order to do all those things, we have to use energy, and energy is in the form of ATP. This can be influenced by what foods we're eating and how big the meal is. So different foods actually have different thermic effects of food. Fats, I think this is so interesting. Fats contribute 0 to 3%. Carbs, carb is CHO. Carbs contribute 5 to 10%. Protein, PRO, that says protein, contributes 20 to 30%. And alcohol is not even on here, but alcohol contributes about 15 to 20. So alcohol, ALC. So what that means is if you're eating a protein food, for example, a chicken breast that is 100 calories, 30 of those calories might go just to absorbing that, breaking it down, transporting it, etc. Spicy foods are an interesting thing. So spicy foods may make you feel fuller or increase energy expenditure by about 8%. So that is interesting. Okay, larger meals do increase thermic effect of food. There are some foods that are said to be 0-calorie foods, and some examples are celery and grapefruit. However, there has not been much research to actually prove this, but the thought with them being called 0-calorie foods is that their thermic effect, meaning the energy needed to break them down, is actually higher than their caloric contribution. And so when you eat them, you don't actually get any calories. Oops, I want to go next. Okay, so physical activity. Physical activity is so important, and this is something that we can actually very much change about the total energy expenditure that we have during the day. So this can account for about 25 to 40%. I have seen even higher numbers than that. And it depends on body size and composition, Lean muscle mass is more metabolically active, meaning it burns more calories than fat tissue. Gender, for example, women usually have less lean body mass because they have more fat, and so that can affect it. And activity, what type of activity that you're doing. Calories burned based on weight. So somebody who weighs more will actually burn more calories doing the same exercise as somebody who weighs less. And if you think about that, that kind of makes sense. Even think about physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. And mass could be body weight. Acceleration could be the speed at which you run, the 10-minute mile. But if the mass is higher, you're going to need a much greater force. And in this sense, the force could be energy or calories. So here you have a smaller person running 10-minute miles. They're going to burn 95 calories versus a larger person running that same 10-minute mile is going to burn 450 calories. This is where it gets kind of complicated. And this is where actually weight loss becomes difficult. One of the reasons where. So say this person is 200 pounds. As they start to lose weight, they actually burn less calories doing the same activity that they did when they were bigger. And so as they lose weight, they cannot burn as many calories as they did when they had gained weight. And so they have to increase their exercise. So maybe they have to run 2 miles, and they also have to decrease their calorie intake. And so this is one of the reasons that losing weight is difficult. Adaptive thermogenesis. So this is the fourth component contributing to energy expenditure. And this is a relatively small portion of it all. But I guess it could be higher depending on the climate or depending on the person. And this has to do with involuntary activities. This is heat produced when the body expends energy for non-voluntary physical activity. And this could be fidgeting, shivering, maintaining muscle tone, or holding the body upright. So if you were in a very cold climate and you were shivering all the time, perhaps you would have a higher effect of thermogenesis. Measuring energy expenditure. So how can we measure how many calories we are actually using? There are 3 main methods to measure this. Actually, I'll say there are two methods to measure it and 1 method to estimate it. So there is direct and indirect calorimetry, which can measure this. And then there are many, many energy equations. I decided to not go over this in that much detail. But if you want to learn more about it, you can read about it in your book. Things that may affect weight. So what about hunger? What about satiety? What do those things even mean? So hunger and satiety, I guess we're going to define a little bit later, but hunger is the physiological drive to find and eat food. And this is controlled by hormones and our nervous system. Satiety is the satisfaction where we no longer have that urge to eat. There are many proteins and hormones involved. These are just 2 listed here. Additional factors involved are our blood glucose levels. For example, if our blood glucose is low, the hunger response will be triggered. Stomach expansion, if our stomach has expanded because there is lots of food in it, a signal will be sent telling us we're full. We don't need to seek out food anymore. And then nutrient absorption. If nutrients are being quickly and effectively absorbed, those nutrients are going to reach the bloodstream and signals are going to be sent to tell us we don't need any more. So hormones that are associated with this. Ghrelin. So ghrelin is a hormone that produces weight gain, and it does so by promoting appetite and promoting efficient energy storage. And appetite is the physiological drive to eat. But appetite kind of unlike hunger, is affected by many external factors, such as the time of day, mood, visual cues, etc. Ghrelin will stimulate appetite by acting on the hypothalamus, and protein breakdown actually reduces ghrelin. And so that is why protein foods are very satiating. When you eat protein foods, you don't feel that hungry, because as you break down those proteins, ghrelin is reduced and appetite is reduced. Peptide Y. This is a peptide produced in the GI tract that helps to decrease appetite and helps shut off hunger. Sometimes obese people have lower levels of this, so they potentially physiologically feel more hungry. Additional hormones. So this is considered a hormone-like protein. Leptin is actually a protein, and it acts like a hormone, and it is produced by the fat cells. Protein, the I goes there, not there. It is controlled by the OB gene, and the OB gene stands for obesity, and it's affected by the amount of body fat people have. They have done studies on mice, and here you see on the right, there is a mouse who has been treated with leptin, but it has lost weight. And then on the left, there is a mouse that was not treated with leptin and weighs a lot. So these were both leptin deficient mice. And the one that received leptin did not gain as much weight, but was still bigger than a normal mouse. What else? So I talked a little bit about this obesity gene. The OB gene is primarily expressed in fat tissue or adipose tissue, and it codes for leptin. If somebody has a mutation in the OB gene, it can reduce the levels of leptin. If you have low levels of leptin, it could cause increased food intake, decreased energy expenditure, decreased metabolic weight, and increased weight gain. So we wanted to look at leptin in humans, and we haven't quite found that many answers yet. So leptin deficiency in humans is very rare, but has been seen. If humans are leptin deficient and they are given a leptin injection, this can help them lose weight. However, leptin injections only work when there's leptin deficiency. So if a person does produce leptin and they're not deficient, giving them more leptin won't help. There's an interesting relationship between fructose consumption and leptin, and fructose consumption tends to increase leptin resistance and accelerate fat storage. So what that means is somebody might be producing leptin, but their cells don't use it. So the key here is that treating normal people with leptin doesn't cause significant weight loss. This is a diagram of how leptin works and what happens when we gain and lose fat. So when fat is gained, more leptin is released, and this triggers events that decrease food intake and increase energy expenditure. When we lose fat, less leptin is released, and this causes an intake in food and a decrease in energy expenditure. So this right here is just another reason why losing weight is hard. When you lose weight, you are going to want to eat more and store fat more. Okay, so this is a question. Eating as a result of the sight, smells, and sounds of food is hunger or appetite? The answer to this is appetite. Hunger and appetite are both physiological functions. However, hunger is a little bit different, and hunger is usually controlled by the nervous system, the central nervous system, metabolic disease states, where appetite might be a social custom, the time of day, mood, memories, visual cues, medications, tumors, or learned preferences. So example, I might see a cookie and I might have an appetite for that cookie, or I might see some sushi and I have an appetite for that sushi, or all my friends are eating, it's a party, I might feel like eating. Behavioral factors that influence weight and food choice. So hunger versus appetite. I kind of discussed this. Appetite is due to a lot of these external influences where hunger is more hormonal. Hunger is signaled by the hypothalamus, and many factors can influence hunger, such as the last meal you ate, the presence or absence of nutrients such as glucose in the blood, the weather. Even if it's hot outside, people are usually less hungry versus when it's cold outside. And appetite is more kind of external factors. So these learned preferences, religious, cultural issues, emotional issues, somebody hurt my feelings, I want to eat some ice cream. So they are a little bit different. Okay. These are some questions that I want you to think about. So this is a YouTube video on obesity, and I do want you to watch it. It's about 20 minutes long, and then think about these questions. I may actually be putting them on a discussion board for you. Obviously, when you do your answers, be nice about them. Be professional about them. Be respectful with your answers. Weight management. So we already saw energy balance, and we saw how eating more than you're burning can lead to weight gain versus eating less than you're burning can lead to weight loss. There are other factors that contribute to somebody's ability to gain and lose weight, and we're going to explore some of these coming up. Genetic factors. So this is pretty interesting. So children with no obese parents have about a 10% risk of becoming obese themselves. Children with one obese parent, about a 40% risk. Children with two obese parents, 80% risk. And so you might ask the question, is this nature or nurture? Like, is it the actual genes that have been passed down, or is it lifestyle factors? And I do believe it could be both. However, they have done many studies that actually say it's mostly genetics. So for example, twins. Identical twins, they have very similar, very identical genomes. If identical twins are raised apart, say they are adopted by different families, they still show similar weight gain patterns. In other adoptive children, not necessarily twins, but adoptive children show similar weight gain patterns to their biological parents versus their adopted parents. All right, other factors. So more genetics. So thrifty gene factor. The thrifty gene, actually, is something going to fly in here? No, okay. The thrifty gene proposes that people with this gene expend less energy than other people and therefore gain weight. And the thrifty gene was a survival adaptation that probably started thousands of years ago, but it allowed people to hold on to weight very tightly. And this would have been beneficial hundreds and thousands of years ago when food was scarce and potentially people had to go weeks and even a month without food. One group that does potentially still exhibit this gene, actually two groups, some Native Alaskans and some Pacific Islanders, for example, Samoa and Guam. And it is thought that this was a survival adaptation specifically for the islanders who took large sea trips where they traveled between islands in homemade boats, and those trips took a really long time. And so during those trips, they did not have enough food, and so they adapted to be able to hold on to their weight very tightly and gain weight in times of food abundance. Set point theory. So I've got more on this coming up, but this says that the body compensates for changes in energy balance and keeps a person's weight at his or her set point. And so here is a diagram of the set point theory, and this is a really cool TED Talk that you guys should watch. But what happens is the body has this set point, and the set point is the point where your body is happy. However, the set point can change over time, and it's most likely to change if you change your diet or if you change your exercise levels. So for example, here this person potentially reduced their intakes and they lost weight, but now they're here. And remember, when you lose weight, one, you could feel more hungry. Two, you have lower body mass, and so you burn less calories when you exercise. Three, your metabolism is reduced, and so you hold on to fat tighter. Also, weight loss causes reductions in thyroid hormone. Body's better at storing fat. You do lose some muscle when you lose weight. And so once this person kind of hits this bottom here, if they go back to their normal eating habits and they're no longer on a diet because they're like, hey, I lost weight, I don't need to diet or exercise anymore, they are going to gain that weight back, and they are going to gain more than that weight back because they have changed their metabolism and their body composition. Then here they are, this girl's all upset. Now she weighs more than she used to. So she says, oh, I'm going to diet again. And she does. And she gets to here, which, she's okay about that. But she's again like resetting her metabolism. And so then when she goes back to her old habits, she gains more. And the body creates this new set point. There's a really good podcast about this. But this can be one of the reasons why weight loss can be difficult. This can also be a reason why it can be difficult for an underweight person to gain weight. Okay, so how can we manage our weight? This is a triangle with three things. I think it's a little bit more complicated than this, but here it is. So controlling energy intake, performing regular physical activity, and controlling problem behaviors. And we're going to talk a little bit about this coming up. So at first I had decided not to include this slide, and then I decided to include this slide. I decided to not include it because this isn't perfect. This isn't true for everybody, as we've talked about how everybody is different. However, this could be a good rule of thumb. So in general, to change weight, there is about 3,500 calories of energy in each pound. So if you want to lose a pound, you have to lose 3,500 calories. If you want to gain a pound, you have to gain 3,500 calories. And so there's different ways you could do this. So for example, here in weight loss, you can reduce what you eat by 500 calories, or you can increase physical activity by 500 calories. Or the most effective method has actually been when people split the difference. So they increase physical activity and they reduce calories. And increasing physical activity will help build lean body mass, which we know is more metabolically active. Wow. Okay. So this is a chart that, again, I had taken out, but I decided to include it. I've got a couple of these coming up, and I am including this just for interest. So you do not have to memorize this, but these are ways to save calories. So these are like choose this instead of that. So save 140 calories by choosing lean beef versus marbled beef. Marbling in beef represents fat. Save 310 calories by choosing one apple versus apple pie. Save 45 calories by choosing 1% milk versus whole milk. Save 150 calories by choosing a gin and tonic instead of a wine cooler, etc. So you can see that these are great tips to reduce calories. These are how many calories you will burn by doing different activities. So aerobics, 8 calories per kilo per hour. Basketball, 10 calories per kilo per hour. Running or jogging, 13.2. Downhill skiing, swimming, volleyball, water skiing, weightlifting, etc. And here you got sleeping at 1.2. Weight management. Diet plans to avoid. So fad diets. You guys are going to actually do an assignment on fad diets. Programs based on a new discovery. So generally speaking, new discoveries are not evidence-based. I mean, you could investigate it and find out, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of evidence. Something that promises rapid weight loss without exercise. If you rapidly lose weight without exercise, first of all, you are going to lose muscle too, and that can be harmful. Special foods, superfoods, magic foods, cure-all foods. One of my favorite podcasts called Sawbones has a saying when they talk about, these different mechanisms to cure disease and health, and they say cure-alls cure nothing. And it is absolutely true. There is not a cure-all out there. If there was, we would all use it and we would all be cured, and disease doesn't exist. So cure-alls cure nothing. Rigid and limited menus, nutrient restriction, diets that define specific nutrients as keys to weight loss. So that kind of goes with the special foods and magic foods. Okay, comparing diets. So what is the best diet for weight loss? What is the most important factor of a diet? And is weight loss easy? I think the best diet for weight loss is the diet that you can follow. They have done lots and lots of research on high fat, high protein, low carb, high fiber, and generally speaking, whichever diet the person can follow is the best diet for them. What is the most important factor? I would say there's multiple, but I would say one, that you are eating healthy and whole foods, and two, that you are reducing calories. Is weight loss easy? Is it easy to maintain? Absolutely not. So some tips: setting realistic goals, SMART goals, specific, measurable, action-oriented, reasonable, and time appropriate. So for example, you could say, I'm going to cut out 100 calories a day by not drinking soda, and I'm going to do this for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to reassess. An unreasonable goal would be, I'm going to lose 10 pounds this week, because 1, it's not realistic. 2, you didn't say how. 3, the timeline is too short. Eating smaller portions, participating in regular physical activity. This is kind of a complicated one, but generally speaking, to lose weight, you need at least an hour a day. Self-monitoring, what do calories look like? Keys for successful weight change. These are some tips. These are some tips, and there are actually many, many more in your book. I think there's many more that you can read as well. This one is a little bit tricky. So this one, I would say I'm not totally sure about, and that's because there's a lot of new evidence coming out, actually about spacing the time between meals and fasting and different types of timing. So I'd say that the truth of this is still to be determined. Professional help. So look for help, see a doctor. Likely the doctor will refer you to a dietitian. See an exercise physiologist. They can give you advice about physical activity. Get clinical treatment. I'm not talking much about clinical treatment in this chapter, but if you're interested, you can read more about it in your book. Last but not least, I feel bad there's only one slide on this, but underweight. It is very possible for people to be underweight, and underweight is categorized as a BMI 18.5 or less. There are health risks. For example, it can interfere with the menstrual cycle in women. It can increase risk of infections and illness. It can lead to decreases in bone mass. It can complicate pregnancy. It can affect growth. And so underweight can be an issue. If somebody has always been underweight and they come from a family of very small, petite people, it is probably okay that they're a little underweight. But if they're severely underweight, it can actually cause death, because when you're very underweight, you lose muscle mass. So some tips to gain weight: adding calories, maybe frequent meals, balancing diet, avoiding tobacco products. These depress appetite, maybe some exercise to gain some muscle. So those are all important tips for weight. Okay, thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next time.